Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Pension Awareness Month. My name's Catherine Murray. I'm the Training and Engagement Manager from my CSP, the Administrator of the Civil Service Pension Scheme. I'm joined today by two of my training team colleagues, Joe McLaughlin and Helen Shrimpton, and we're here to guide you on your pension journey. Today's session focuses on life events and key things that can impact your pension as you are on your journey towards retirement. So key things that you might not have considered or might be considering if your circumstances are changing in the future. So there's lots of useful information for you and things to think about based on your personal circumstances. Along with the rest of the sessions for Pension Awareness Month, today's session is being recorded, so you will be able to watch it back from lunchtime tomorrow on the Civil Service Pension Scheme website on the dedicated Pension Awareness Month pages. If there's some useful information you need to look at again, or maybe you'd like to recommend the session to a friend or colleague, then you are able to do that. We are taking your questions on today's session, so if you have any questions for us, please do pop them into the Q&A and we'll aim to answer as many of your questions as we can in the latter part of today's session. Please don't include any of your personal circumstances in there. We won't be able to answer any of those questions, but any general questions you have for us, then please just let us know. And if you see a question that you'd like to know the answer to, then please upvote that and we will focus on answering the most upvoted questions in the last part of today's session. So to get us underway, I'm going to now hand you over to Joe, who's going to talk about the life events and the things that you need to consider and how they might impact your civil service pension. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Catherine. As Catherine's just touched on, we'll be having a look at life events today. So I will move over to the presentation. So we'll be having a think about pensions calculations, what's involved with the different schemes, how they work. We're also looking at changing your work pattern, so different things that can impact on how your pension will work for you under different circumstances, essentially. We'll also look at getting promoted, what that might mean. We'll be thinking about divorce, the impact that can have on your pension, and then we'll also move on to cover ill health benefits, what's payable in those circumstances, what exactly will happen, and we'll have a think about the 2015 remedy as well. So in terms of pensions calculations, there's three final salary schemes that we have: Classic, Classic Plus and Premium. Final salary is essentially just the way that those schemes calculate benefits, and what that means will become more evident as we have a look at each of those schemes. And Career Average is Alpha and Nouveau, so the two newer schemes, and they work out benefits in a slightly different way. So final salary calculations, there's a few key ingredients that are involved here: reckonable service, pensionable earnings, accrual rate, and that will produce your final annual pension. Now the schemes all do this slightly differently. Some of the key elements are consistent, such as reckonable services worked out essentially the same in all the schemes. Pensionable earnings is slightly different and the accrual rate can differ as well. Now the reckonable service, particularly in terms of where people have now moved across to Alpha, is essentially fixed. You may have an option about how to rebalance it through your remedy option, but you won't be building up any more. So in Classic, Classic Plus and Premium, the maximum amount of service that you could achieve will now have been achieved from the end of March last year. The accrual rate used in those schemes is slightly different. It's an 80th for Classic and a 60th for Premium. Now in the newer schemes, pensionable earnings, or particularly in Alpha, I should say, actually not Nouvos, pensionable earnings could still change, and the rates and values that are used for that and how your pension builds up will still be affected by those pensionable earnings as you move through. Also, and the point that I should have been making in the first place that I've just realised, is the final salary schemes, we're still looking at your current pay. So for Classic, Classic Plus and Premium, for example, the service that you have is fixed. That's now been calculated to its maximum point. The pensionable earnings that we use are still your current pensionable earnings. And that will be continuing to change up until you leave. And we'll be looking at your most recent rates of pay to work those out. We will, though, be using your full-time equivalent earnings to make sure that you're not disadvantaged by any changes in working patterns. So, for example, George had 24 years of reckonable service on leaving Premium in 2022. His pensionable earnings at the time were £25,000. So if we'd worked out George's pension at that point in time, it would have been 25,000 times 24 years divided by 60 would have given him a pension at £10,000 at that point in time. Now, George is actually going to retire in 2030 when he reaches 60. His pensionable earnings then will be £32,000 as he's been promoted. Now, 32,000 times 24 divided by 60 gives him a pension of 12,800. So the key thing here is George can't build up any more service. That 24 years is now fixed, but we are continuing to look at your current rates of pay. So in George's case, if we'd used his pay at the time, he'd have come out with a pension of £10,000. Because we don't work that out until he leaves in 2030, we'll be using his new pay of 32,000. So his pension is actually worth 12,800. Now, in the career average schemes, Nuvos and Alpha, there's a couple of slightly different things to think about. Nuvos is now frozen. So anybody who had a Nuvos pension prior to moving over to Alpha, that pension is effectively frozen. The inflation will continue to be added onto that pension though throughout. So both while you're not claiming it and indeed afterwards. For Alpha though, Alpha will be building up year on year, and that's building up at 2.32% of your earnings each year. It's also getting inflation to keep that tracking as you move forwards as well. So as an example for Alpha, in year one we have pensionable earnings of £25,000. 2.32% of 25,000 is 580. So after 1 year's membership, this member now has a pension worth £580 per year. It's obviously not quite enough to retire to Monaco on yet at this point, but that is a permanent income of £580 per year every year for the rest of this person's life. Now, in year two, the first thing that we always do in each following year is add inflation. Inflation will change and reflect inflation in the economy at that time. It can be quite high and it can be very low, as we've seen in recent years. In this example, we've just chosen a rate of 3.1%. The first thing that we do is add inflation onto our current pension, and 3.1% of £580 is £17.98. That means in year two, we've accrued £17.98 worth of inflationary increases, and that will be added on top. Now in year two, the crucial thing next is what we earned during year two. And in year two, we earned £26,000. 2.32% of that is £603.20. By the end of year two, that means we now have a total of the £580 we'd earned from the year before, inflation at £17.98, and new pension at £603.20. We've now got a pension worth £1,200. Moving on into year three, the same thing happens again. We add inflation to the pension that we've already built up. Now, in this example, we've used 10.1%, which is reflecting recent increases. 10.1% of £1,200 is £121.31 in this instance. That will be added on top of our pension as inflation. During year three, we earned £27,000. 2.32% of that is £626.40. So by the end of year three, we can see our pension balance from year one of 121.18, plus our inflation of 121.31, and our new pension of 626.40. We've now got a total pension of 1948.89. You can see therefore the impact that inflation has had on, as well as earnings increasing each year in terms of how these pensions build up. A large inflationary increase in this case has had quite a big effect on the value of that pension. Now, there's also the question of changing your working pattern and the hours that you work. How does that affect the pensions that you built up already? For the final salary schemes, essentially there's no impact. The service that you've built up is already fixed. So changing your hours now isn't going to retrospectively affect that older pension. In terms of the pay that we use as well, that will remain unchanged, as we'll use the full-time equivalent pay to work out that pension. So by going part-time, you aren't disadvantaging your older final salary pension. In Nuvos, there's no impact at all. We're not looking at your earnings anymore for Nuvos. We're just adding inflation each year, so no impact will be had. And in Alpha, it will affect your future accrual. You change the hours that you work, that will impact what you're earning each year. and that will impact any benefits you earn in the future. It won't impact those benefits, though, that you've already built up. They will be changed, just everything you build up from that point onwards. As an example, we have Helen. She's currently earning £28,000. She's working full time. So in year one, she earns £649.60 of alpha pension. That's 28,000 times 2.32. She needs to work part-time at 20 hours from the 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 2023. That means her salary is then decreasing to £15,135.13. In this year, she then earns £351.13 pension. That's 15,135.13 times 2.32. So we can see in that year where she earned less, she's as a result picking up less pension. Then from the 1st of April 2023, she returns to full-time work and again accrues 649.60. Change in hours won't affect Helen's final salary benefits because they are still based on her full-time equivalent pay. Promotion, what impact might that have? For the final salary schemes, if you do have one of those older schemes, that will impact that pension. The reckonable service will still remain unchanged, but if you've received a sudden jump in salary, that is going to be taken in account for the salary that we use to work out that pension when you come to pay it. In NUBOS, there'll be no impact. Again, NUBOS is only being increased with inflation. In Alpha, it will also affect that scheme as well because you'll now be earning more. So each year on into the future, you'll be earning more each year and building up more alpha pension. As an example, we have Gordon. His salary is £28,000 and he's also working full time. In year one, he earns £649.60 alpha pension, which is 2.32% of £28,000. He then receives a promotion, which takes him up to £34,000 from the 1st of April 2023. That means in the next year, he earns £788.80 pension, which is 2.32% of £34,000. From the 1st of April 2024, his pay then increases again to £35,000, and that means he accrues £812 in the 24 to 25 year, 2.32% of £35,000. Gordon also has 10 years of service in Classic. His Classic pension will increase from £3,000 to £4,375 per year due to this increase in salary to £35,000 and his lump sum from £9,000 to £13,125. Now, next question, what happens in terms of a career break? There's a few things to consider here. Firstly, is essentially no benefits will accrue whilst on an unpaid break. You're not being paid, there's no contributions going into the scheme. There will be, therefore, no extra pension calculated during that period. Could choose to contribute to added pension or AVCs on your return, however, to top up that missed period and help offset the difference at that point. If you're interested in those, there is loads of information about both added pension and AVCs on the Civil Service Pensions website. And the last thing that I will cover today is divorce. If you're getting divorced, you'll likely be asked to obtain a value of your civil service pension, and that's referred to as a cash equivalent transfer value, or CETV. It's literally what the cash value of your pension would be if we were doing something else with it, such as transferring it. Your farmer, spouse or civil partner could be awarded some of your pension and or a lump sum by the court, and that could be through a pension sharing order, attachment order or earmarking order. The exact terms and conditions for each of those is slightly different. They'll be explained to you as part of the proceedings. There's also more guidance online to consider how that will affect your pension in general as well. A percentage of your benefits could be given up and turned into a separate pension for your former spouse or partner. A court order is required for this to be implemented. Some charges may be applicable. The court order will state who is responsible for meeting them in those circumstances. So I hope that's been useful. There's plenty for you to consider there. And at that point, I will hand back to Catherine and we'll get ready for the second half.
Thanks, Joe. That was great. Really useful to see how all those different things can impact your pension. And it's important to give it some thought as well. I think if you're in a situation where some of these events are occurring and you may be going through a divorce, or you're having to change your working pattern or take a career break or whatever it might be, of course, your immediate concern is what impact that's going to have on your pay at the moment. But having that long-term consideration of how it's going to impact your benefits in retirement as well is always worth making some time to think about, although obviously it's not your immediate concern. There's lots of dedicated information on the Pension Awareness Month pages of the scheme website, so do please take some time out to have a look at that information, and I might answer some of the other queries that you have as well. And also remember, we have our Pension Power sessions available as well. We run these webinars every single weekday. It's a 1-hour session that gives you a whistle-stop tour of all of the benefits of your civil service pension scheme. And we do run those to quite small groups of around 30 to 40 people. So you're in a much smaller session, there's more opportunity to get your questions answered on those. But do please keep your questions coming in for today's session. We've had quite a lot so far, which is great, and we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can. But before we do that, I'm going to now pass you to Helen, who's going to give you some information mainly on the 2015 remedy on the cloud judgment, which is a real hot topic in the pensions world at the moment. So over to you, Helen.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Thank you as well, Joe, for that information that we've covered so far. As we said, we're going to talk about a little bit more about how other life events may affect you in your decisions for pensions. So I'm just going to share our presentation. It won't be a moment. So in terms of ill health retirement, if that does happen to you, there are some criteria that need to be met in order for ill health retirement to be considered. So the criteria of ill health retirement for the civil service pension scheme is that you must have at least 2 years of qualifying service. So your qualifying service is simply the length of time you've been a member of the civil service pension scheme. If you were a full-time worker or a part-time worker, a week of qualifying service will still be the same. That does differ to reckonable service, which is the service that's used in a pension calculation for final salary schemes. So the criteria for ill health retirement is that you must have at least 2 years of qualifying service, and that your health must, in the opinion of the scheme medical advisor, so the body that assesses your medical condition, your condition will permanently prevent you from being able to do your job or a similar role. So in terms of application for ill health retirement, you must do this through your employer. You couldn't apply directly to civil service pension scheme for ill health retirement. That application has to come through your employer. So your employer and yourself would have a conversation and sit down to see if ill health retirement is suitable, and then you will complete and submit the application form. You may also need to provide evidence to the scheme medical advisor with regards to your medical condition, so then they can do the assessment. So your employer will send your ill health application to the scheme medical advisor, but you would need to include some evidence of your medical condition to allow that assessment to take place by the scheme medical advisor. So if ill health retirement then is granted, the scheme medical advisor would look at your medical condition and advise whether upper tier or lower tier ill health retirement can be granted. Now, these are the 2 tiers and the 2 assessment criteria in which ill health retirement is decided under. So a lower tier ill health retirement would be that your medical condition prevents you from being able to do your job or a similar role, but you may be able to perform some other actions. If you are granted lower tier ill health retirement, then the benefits that you've accrued to so far are paid to you without there being any reduction applied if you're having to leave the scheme earlier than your normal pension age due to ill health. The upper tier ill health criteria, again, the assessment is done by the scheme medical advisor. And if they deem that your medical condition permanently prevents you from being able to do any sort of role, then you may qualify for upper tier ill health retirement. In upper tier cases, an enhancement will be applied to your benefits. If you're having to leave the pension scheme very early due to your medical condition and you've been granted upper tier ill health retirement, then enhancements could be applied to your pension as well. So what do I mean by that? Here's an example. We had a member, Graham, who was 45 years old, and due to his medical condition, he was awarded upper tier ill health retirement. So Graham had been a member of the Alpha pension scheme since 2015, and his ill health retirement date is in 2023. So he's been a member of the Alpha pension scheme then for 8 years. Now, as the scheme medical advisor has advised that upper tier ill health retirement should be granted, we will have a look at Graham's pension built up to that date, which is £5,000. We then divide that by the number of years he's been a member of the Alpha scheme, which is 8. So that gives us £625 to help us to work out what enhancement should be applied to Graham's pension. Now, Graham has got 22 years to go until his normal pension age of 67. So to work out the enhancement that should be applied to Graham's pension, we look at that £625. We then times that by 22, the number of years Graham has to go till his normal pension age, and that gives us a total of £13,750. So that's the enhancement that will be applied to Graham's pension. So in total, Graham's total upper tier ill health pension, if he is retiring under upper tier ill health grounds, is that £13,750 as enhancement, plus the Alpha pension he's built up to this point, which is £5,000. So that's a total of £18,750. In the Alpha pension scheme, your ill health pension is also then paid to you in regular monthly instalments for the rest of your life. There is a caveat that if you have limited life expectancy, then payment can be made as a lump sum, but in general, it is paid to you in regular monthly instalments, as would a normal civil service pension be. So again, just to reiterate how we work out that enhancement under upper tier ill health grounds, it's the amount of pension that's been built up to that point, divided by the number of years the member has been in the scheme, and then we times that figure by the number of years remaining up until their normal pension age. So remember, normal pension age is the age that you will claim your pension benefits without there being any reduction applied to it for early payments. And then that equals the enhancement that will be applied to an upper tier ill health pension. Enhancements aren't applied to lower tier ill health pensions, but you would still receive your pension without there being any reduction for having that pension early. So on to the 2015 remedy, the MacLeod judgment. Like as Joe mentioned before and Catherine mentioned, it is the hot topic at the moment when it comes to the civil service pension scheme. So for those members who've been affected by the 2015 remedy, formerly MacLeod, let's have a look at a little bit of information and the considerations that you might need to make if you think you have been impacted. So the 2015 remedy, as it's now known, it was formerly known as the MacLeod judgment, did affect public sector pensions as a whole, but just for some explanation, I'll just bring it back to the civil service arrangements. So on the 1st of April 2015, the Alpha pension scheme was introduced as the open pension scheme for civil servants. Now, the Alpha pension scheme was brought in, and those previous pension schemes, such as Classic or Premium or Classic Plus, for new members of the scheme, anyone who joined after April 2015 was automatically enrolled into Alpha. However, those members of a previous pension scheme, such as Classic or Premium or Classic Plus or Nuvos, those who were closest to their retirement were allowed to remain in their original scheme without being then moved over into Alpha as per legislation. However, those that had remained in their original scheme had something called transitional protection, so that delayed their move into Alpha, but that protection was actually deemed to be unlawfully discriminate. Under the grounds of age discrimination, it was deemed to be benefiting older members over younger members. So a person called Mr. MacLeod, hence it being the MacLeod judgment, he took the transitional protection to the Court of Appeal, and there needed to be a High Court case, and this transitional protection was deemed to be unlawfully discriminate. So there now needs to be a remedy in place to fix that discrimination. So a consultation took place in 2020. Off the back of the consultation, it was then decided that all members of civil service pension schemes are now members of Alpha. So all active members of the civil service pension scheme had to be moved into the Alpha scheme by the 1st of April last year if they hadn't already been done so. Now, stage 2 of the remedy and what's going to happen next is still ongoing, but we will provide a little bit more detail as to the choices that members have now with regard to the remedy. So those of you who may have been impacted by the remedy, you would have had to been in service on or before the 31st of March 2012, and you continue to be a member of the Civil Service Pension Scheme on or after the 1st of April 2015. Now, the remedy period where members will be given choices about which pension scheme they would like their benefits calculated in will be from the 1st of April 2015 up until the 31st of March 2022. So any service past the 31st of March 2022 will be in your current pension scheme, which is Alpha. So for members of the remedy, it's that 7-year period as the focus for the choices that you will be given. So like I say, those 2 periods of service will be treated as continuous unless you had a qualifying break of 5 years or more. If you're not sure whether you've been affected or not by the remedy, there is quite a useful tool on the Civil Service Pension Scheme website to help you with this. Like with everything these days, there's also a little AI chatbot. You can ask questions and it will learn the questions that you're asking. But if you're not sure if you have been affected or not, you can have a look at the tool and put in your start dates, and then the tool will be able to tell you if you have been affected by the 2015 remedy or McLeod. So in terms of the choice that you make for that 7-year period, this will be your choice to make. You can decide whether you would like your benefits in your previous legacy schemes, such as Classic or Classic Plus or Premium and Nuvos, if that was a scheme that you were a member of. Or you could have your 7-year period back in the Alpha scheme. However, remember, from the 1st of April onwards, those benefits will be calculated in the Alpha scheme. So it's that 7-year period from the 1st of April 2015 to the 31st of March 22. That's where the choice will be given, where you have to make which pension scheme you would like your benefits in. So whether you remain as you are now, an Alpha member, or you revert that back to your previous pension scheme. So in terms of making your choice, from the 1st of October this year, Civil Service Pensions will then start to contact members with their choices. So if your retirement is imminent, i.e. you're going to retire before the 1st of October or just after it, on your retirement quote paperwork, you will be given your remedy choices. It'll be displayed for you in paperwork which choice would give you which pension, and of course you can then make that choice of which scheme you'd like to be a member of. You can also decide, obviously, when you claim your benefits as well. So like I say, a clear breakdown of those figures will be provided to members on their quote paperwork. You can't really make the choice beforehand because there's too many factors in place that would affect your decision, such as your earnings at the point that you leave, and also what any inflation increases to be applied may be as well. So the choice is officially known as a deferred choice underpin, and you make that choice at the point that you retire. So when you're given your retirement quote paperwork, your remedy choices will be displayed for you. So what does impact your choice then? So of course, the age that you choose to retire, you can retire at your normal pension age for the scheme that you're in, or you could choose to retire below that age. But remember, there may be a reduction in the pension that you receive for claiming your pension benefits below your normal pension age. As I mentioned before, your pay at the point that you leave or retire from the civil service could affect your impacted choice. And again, any future inflation adjustments as well. We don't know the future, of course, so we don't know what any future increases may be. But again, that is always detailed for you on your retirement quote paperwork that you'll receive when you go through the retirement process. So I just wanted to give you all a little example of how the choice may work. So here we had George, and George's salary was £25,000 on the 1st of April 2015. So he was a member of a final salary pension scheme, and then on the 1st of April 2015, he joined the Alpha pension scheme. Now, George's salary remained at £25,000 for that 7-year remedy period. So he didn't have any changes in his earnings from the 1st of April 2015 up until the 31st of March 2022. So what are George's choices then when he retires? So if he chooses Alpha, then his pension at the point that he retires will be £4,382.11. Remember, pensions are paid every year for the rest of someone's life, so he'll receive that yearly pension. If George then decides to choose his classic pension, well, under the calculation for classic, as we've detailed before, George's pension will actually be £2,187.50 a year. Now, with the classic scheme, you're also given an automatic tax-free lump sum. So that lump sum for George will be £6,562.50. Now, if George decides to claim his alpha pension earlier than his normal pension age, so remember your alpha normal pension age is your state pension age, but let's say that George wants to claim his alpha pension at 60, then that's going to be £3,155.12 a year. So that alpha pension would have been reduced for claiming it early. Now, if George claims the alpha at 60 and takes an equal lump sum to the classic scheme, because remember in the alpha scheme, you can also have a tax-free lump sum paid to you, and you would do that by reducing part of your pension. So if George decides to take that alpha pension at 60, and also takes an equal lump sum to the classic scheme, then George's alpha pension is going to be £2,608.24 and a lump sum of £6,562.50. So had George been in premium, then their benefits would then be adjusted. Here's another example. We have Jenna. And Jenna's salary was £25,000 on the 1st of April 2015 when she joined Alpha, but Jenna's had changes to her salary in the time that she's been in Alpha. So her salary is increased by £1,000 each year, up to £31,000 in the year of 21-22. So Jenna's choice for remedy, if she chooses her Alpha pension, under the alpha calculation of 2.32% of your earnings, would be then £4,896.32 a year. If she chooses her classic pension under remedy, that's going to be £2,712.50 with a lump sum of £8,137.50. Again, if Jenna decides to claim her alpha pension early, then that's going to be £3,525.35. So if Jenna again decides to claim the alpha pension at 60, so she's claiming it earlier than her normal pension age, but remember you can also have a lump sum out of alpha. If she decides to take a lump sum equal to the classic pension scheme, then her pension is going to be £2,847.22, and she can also have a lump sum of £8,137.50. Here's an example if Jenna's future salary then is frozen. So Jenna's going to retire in 3 years' time at age 60. So her salary doesn't change in this time, but she's still going to get inflation applied to her alpha benefits. Now, the inflation rate from the 1st of April 2023 was 10.1%. So therefore, Jenna's pension in alpha is increased to £5,943.41. Now, let's pretend and let's have a bit of a future inflation. So let's say the inflation next year from the 1st of April 2024, let's say it's not as good as 10%, let's say it's 5%. So her classic pension, remember, because it's now a frozen pension, would still remain at £2,712.50 with a lump sum of £8,137.50. Now let's try and predict the future. Let's say the inflation example in April 2025 is another 5%. So in the alpha scheme, if Jenna claims the alpha at 60 also with a lump sum equal to classic, her alpha pension is going to be £3,601.05 with a lump sum of £8,137.50. So it's just to give you some examples in terms of how the accrual rate could affect remedy choices and what you decide when you come to retire. So in terms of future pay rises, Jenna's salary then increases to £40,000 in 2024. So when she retires in 2025, her classic pension is now £3,500 with a lump sum of £10,500. And her alpha pension is going to be £5,943.31. Now, again, if Jenna decides to claim her alpha pension at 60, so there will be a reduction applied for claiming it earlier. and she also decides to opt for an equal lump sum, the same as her classic, then her alpha pension at 60 is going to be £3,404 with a £10,500 lump sum as well. So again, just to give an example of how future pay rises may also affect a remedy decision choice. So in terms of making your choice, remember future salary increases, any promotions and inflation, it can't be predicted. I know it's a little bit counteractive because I've kind of just given you some examples there, but we don't know what the future pension increases will be. We also don't know what your future earnings will be by the time you come to retire. So that's why you make that choice at retirement when it is known which choice is best for you. Now, in terms of doing some future planning from 2024, so next year's annual benefit statements, they will provide figures for the remedy period. The 2023 benefit statements that you just received haven't got any remedy predictions on it because the remedy won't be implemented officially until the 1st of October 2023. And remember, your annual benefit statement always reflects your earnings within the scheme year, which runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. So from next year, your benefit statements will provide figures for the remedy period.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, that was great. As we've said a few times, 2015 remedy on McLeod's a real hot topic, and there's lots of burning questions that people have at the moment. It's quite hard because it's so high profile, but of course we're not asking anyone to make any decisions as of yet unless they are retiring in the very near future. But we're doing as best as we can to give you the information that's available at this particular moment in time. So just to clarify a few of the points that Helen made there, so anyone who is retiring from October this year is now receiving their remedy choice if they're impacted as part of the standard retirement process, and that will be the case for everybody going forward. But if you're not close to retirement as of yet, then on your annual benefit statement from next year, every year you'll get both sets of figures for that 7-year remedy period if you are impacted. So that should mean that by the time retirement comes, you have a pretty good idea of which of the choices is going to be the best one for you. And of course, the retirement modeler is being updated to allow you to use that in conjunction with those new calculations that you'll get on your annual benefit statement next year. So there will be lots more information coming in the next few months to allow you to make those informed choices, or certainly have information about those choices nice and early. So just working in line with all of the legislation being passed through and getting everything available for you as soon as it's possible. There's lots of work going on in the background at the moment. And again, if you're not quite sure what this 2015 remedy thing is and whether you're impacted or not, then do check out the Am I Affected tool available on the scheme website, and that will give you a good indication of whether you're going to be impacted or not. And you can use the chat bot for any burning questions that you have online if there's anything that you really need to know. So lots of questions have been coming through, so thank you very much. We appreciate all of the questions that are coming in. We're going to now spend the next 20 minutes or so answering as many of those questions as we possibly can. So I'm going to come to Jo with our first question, which comes in from Lynn. So she says, I'm in both Classic and Alpha. If I retire at age 62, claim my Alpha as well as Classic, how much will my Alpha be reduced by as I'm claiming it 5 years early? And is there anything I can do to make up the reduction losses between now and retirement? So Jo, if you could give us an answer to that, that'd be great.
Yep, quite a lot to unpack there. So I just need to have a think about that for a second. So retiring at 62 and taking the Alpha portion 5 years early. So the reduction for most schemes works on a sliding basis, but it's essentially about 4 to 5% per year. Now, I can't tell you the exact figure off the top of my head for what that will be, but worst case scenario will be about 25%. So you'll be looking about 25% in reduction for that Alpha pension. You can use some of the calculators that are available online to get a more precise figure, and that will work that out for you. And you'll find those through the calculators page on the Civil Service Pensions website. Now, in terms of making up the difference, it's difficult to predict, particularly if you're not taking that for a little while, exactly what the difference will be, because you're obviously not going to know exactly what the pension will be worth at that point in time, but you can get an idea by using that calculator. Now, there's two ways that you can really look to top up your pension. One is added pension. An added pension lets you pay in extra either on a monthly basis, committing to a year at a time, or once per year by paying in a lump sum. Now, exactly what you get back for your money is again determined by your age. So the rate that you get will vary year on year. Again, there is a calculator online that will work that out for you. And you can get an idea about what it would cost and how long you might want to spread that cost over to be able to make up some of that difference. There's also the option of AVCs. AVCs are an investment-based method. So you pay contributions into an investment fund and that builds up over a period of time. That's not as predictable. It's not as easy to figure out exactly how much you would need to put away to replicate that. That is provided by Legal & General, and they do provide some guidance online as to how that may pan out for you. One possible advantage of AVCs is that they're slightly more flexible in terms of what you can take back and when, but there is also that air of unpredictability about investments essentially as a means of saving in the first place. Loads more information about added pension and AVCs on the website. They'll talk you through how both of them work and give you some examples as well. And also bear in mind those calculators are available on the website as well. Hopefully that has helped to answer that question. I will pass back to Catherine at that point, and I'm sure she can add anything that I've missed.
Thank you, Joe. That's great. Yeah, just a very quick recap there. So I would say use the retirement modeler, see what your pension benefits look like at age 62 when you're planning to retire. Maybe then see what those pension benefits look like at your state pension age as well. And you can see what the difference is between those two figures. And then you're able to use the added pension calculator, also available on the scheme website, and then put in that figure as how the difference between the two is how much pension you'd like to buy. And then that will give you an indication of the cost. So that's another way that you might want to consider that, just to sum up what Joe's just said. But added pension, AVCs, always available as options. Tons of information on the website. Thank you for that answer, Joe. So I'll come to Helen next. So let's have a little look at our next most avoided question. If you are a single person, you've never been married and are not cohabiting, do you get your widows and orphans contributions repaid back to you? And if so, approximately what percentage? Burning question we get a lot, and there's only so much information we can share. But Helen, if you can give a little answer to that one for us, please.
Of course, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, absolutely. It is a burning question. We tend to refer to the payback as what we call a WPS refund. So WPS stands for Widows Pension Scheme. It is only applicable to members of the classic pension scheme, this refund. So 1.5% of member contributions go towards providing a widows or it used to be widows and orphans pension scheme in the old days, but we don't really say that anymore. In terms of providing a pension for your spouse or civil partner when you've passed away. Now, if you are single at the point of retiring from the classic pension scheme only, you will get a refund of your contributions back. Now, there are some things that you need to just consider. So I'm stressing before, but you do have to be single at the point that you retire from the classic pension scheme. If you have been widowed or if you've become divorced midway through your partnership, your membership of the classic scheme, then a partial refund is calculated to you. So we calculate it from the point you last became single, whether that's the date that your decree absolute was finalised or from the date that your spouse passed away. So we may have to ask for information in terms of calculating this WPS refund, such as evidence of divorce certificates or evidence of a death certificate. But please be assured we always return certificates back in the same manner that they're sent over to civil service pensions. So the basic calculation that we do for a WPS refund is that we look at your contributions plus interest. We then take away something called a premium deduction. Now, this is to still provide a spouse's pension in the event that you do remarry after you've retired from the classic scheme. So a small amount of that refund is kept aside so we can provide a spouse's pension even if you remarry after retirement. And then that figure left over equals your WPS refund. Now, that figure is also paid to you tax-free. So like I say, if you do qualify for that at civil service pensions, when you come to retire, we will work out if that WPS refund is applicable. Again, you might need to provide evidence such as divorce certificates or death certificates to prove that you are single at the point that you've retired. If you've never married, then you've never married, and we should have that information from your employer with regard to your marital status. So as a final to that, I would always say make sure you keep your marital status up to date with your employer on a regular basis, because it could affect the amount of benefits that you receive when you retire. I hope that's answered your question. And back to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, that was great. A very informative answer. And it is something we get lots of questions about, the widow's pension refund that's applicable just to classic members. I'm just going to pick up the next question myself. So someone's asked, why do we have to reduce our hours to claim our classic pension when we have to work on to get our state pension? This means our alpha pension is then reduced as we are working less, so earning less. So yeah, unfortunately, there isn't a situation where you're able to claim your pension without taking a form of retirement to access your civil service pension. You do have to take a form of retirement. That's always been the case, and those rules haven't changed, unfortunately, with the reintroduction of alpha and that fact that that pension's payable at your state pension age. Just an interesting fact to point out, so while alpha does have that later pension age, it also does have a much more generous rate of accrual for your pension benefits. So in terms of how much you get per year for your pension, in alpha, it's almost double what you get every year in the classic scheme. And what a lot of members who have moved from one of the final salary schemes across to alpha would now find is that if they decided to take those alpha pension benefits early at age 60, in a lot of scenarios, they'd end up with a very similar pension to had they never left the classic pension scheme in the first place, claiming those pension benefits at age 60. So there are lots of different factors that need to be taken into account when making your decision. But unfortunately, those are the rules of the scheme. There's nothing that we can do to change those. And you do have to take a form of retirement when you want to access your pension benefits. So that could well mean you're partially retiring at 60, taking those classic pension benefits, premium benefits, whichever scheme you're a member of. You are able to take the alpha at the same time on a reduced basis if you would like to, or you can defer that and claim that when you fully retire and leave service altogether. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a response to that question. So I'll come back to Joe with our next question. And we've got a member who said, my pension is part final salary and part average salary. If I work beyond the age of 60, and I do not take the final salary portion of my pension until the date I retire, will my final salary pension be based on my salary at the age of retirement or based on my salary at age 60? So Joe, if you could give us an explanation of how we calculate those final salary benefits, please.
So for the final salary schemes, the pay that is calculated is based on the pay that you've been earning up until the day that you leave. So there's not a cut-off at the point that you switch to alpha or at 60, for example. It continues up until the point that you actually leave service. So for classic, that would generally mean looking back 3 years from the point that you leave, and we look for the best year's worth of pay within that 3-year window. For premium, we go back a bit further, it's 13 years, which could result in actually going back as far as your 60th birthday. For most people, it tends to be a more recent year that's used anyway, because for most people, your pay tends to increase year on year, and therefore we will be using those more recent rates. Therefore, things, as we touched on during the presentation, like promotion, etc., even now you've moved over to alpha, can impact that older pension. So if you were to get promoted, for example, that could have quite a big impact on your older pension. Going part-time equally does not negatively affect that older pension. We continue to use the full-time rate. So if you go part-time whilst you're in alpha, that's not going to penalise your older pension. But going back to the original statement, yes, we will look back from the day that you leave, irrespective of when that is, not from your 60th birthday or from the day that you switched over to alpha. I hope that answers your question, and I'll pass back to Catherine.
Thank you, Joe. That's great. Yeah, a question we get asked quite a lot. The next couple of most upvoted questions, I think we've already answered. It's about when will the retirement modeler be updated to take into account the 2015 remedy. We've confirmed that by next summer, when annual benefit statements are issued for 2024, they'll include the information about the retirement, about the remedy choices, and expectation is that the modeler will be updated by then for people to be able to look at those options and project to the future as well. So those are in progress at the moment, certainly be in place by the time we get to annual benefits season next summer. And next question, I'll come to you, Helen. So I have heard that we were contracted out for a period, not sure when, but can you explain what the impact of that is on pensions? I think someone they're asking about being contracted out of the second state pension, which used to apply. So Helen, if you could just give us a little explanation of how that works, please.
Of course, thanks, Catherine. So contracting out, quite rightly, as we've said before, the civil service pension scheme was contracted out of the state's second pension scheme. So they before that time they were contracted in. Now, being contracted out of the state's second pension scheme means that when somebody comes to retire, the civil service pensions will pay a benefit equal to what that would have been had the civil service pension not been contracted out at the time. So just to make it really clear, it's not an extra amount of pension that is paid when you retire from the civil service pension scheme, but the benefit is equal to what you would have received had the civil service pension scheme not been contracted out. So what may happen for some members is when they start to receive their state pension, and they're in receipt of their civil service pension, what they may find is that the civil service pension and the state pension then need to equalise out between each other. So there will be a benefit equal to. So what may happen is the civil service pension may drop ever so slightly in order for the benefits of the state pension to be equalised out together. And the most amount it could ever drop by is £54. So it's a minimum reduction that someone might find on their civil service pension. So if you're not sure if you had been contracted out or not, there is some information on the government state pension website about contracting out. There's a bit more details that you can read up about, but like I say, just for reassurance, it's not a figure that's paid directly by civil service pension, but it's always a figure that equalises out between the state pension and your civil service pension. So that's a very brief explanation, and I hope that's helped to answer that. So back to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Helen. And yeah, just a reminder as well, so you can get information from the gov.uk website and check on the value of your state pension, which is always worthwhile doing, just to make sure you've got the full picture of all of your pension benefits in preparation for retirement. We now have a question from Mark. So he said, I think your annual pension starts on the 6th of April or the Monday after the 6th of April. So based on the expected 8.5% pension increase for next year, if you were to retire on 31st of March next year, would you qualify for the 8.5% inflation adjustment from the 6th of April? This is a question we get asked quite a lot about how inflation works. So just to give a brief explanation of that, we do get asked this question quite a lot. So in the first year after retirement, members basically get a prorated inflation adjustment. So if you've retired anywhere partway through the year, then you'll get a fraction of that inflation adjustment. So we get a lot of people asking questions kind of saying, you know, I'm going to retire on the 31st of March, and therefore in 2023, for example, the inflation adjustment was 10.1%. But people who'd retired on the 31st of March would have got effectively 6 days of that 10.1% inflation adjustment. So in the first year it's prorated, but then you'll receive the full value all years outside of your first year in retirement. So hopefully that answers that question. Let's have a look at some of the other questions that have come in. I think there's quite a few of them that we have already answered. So Joe, if I can come to you with this next question. So Bill has asked, if you are promoted, how long do you have to serve for the increased final salary to be taken into account? So another question about final salary calculations for you, please.
Yeah, no problem. So the easiest way to think about this is it's basically in terms of what you actually earned over that period. So if we think about just your last year, for example, and you've got promotion within that year, we will be looking at what you earned within that year. So if you'd had 6 months at the higher rate, for example, that last year will be calculated as 6 months worth of your new pay and 6 months of the old pay. So the longer you remain on that higher rate of pay, the more of that will be included. If you want all of that higher rate to be included, you would need to have stayed in for a year or thereabouts to get the full value of that higher rate. If you've moved partway through the year, for example, if you've only stayed on that value for a month, then it won't make a big difference to the final rate of that pay. The longer you stay on it, the bigger the difference it will make until you've done a full year, at which point the full value of that increase will be included along with any other rates that you may have jumped to during that time. I hope that answers your question, and I'll pass back to Catherine.
Thank you, Jo. That's great. And that is all of your questions that we've got time for today. We're really sorry if we couldn't get to your question. There were hundreds of them still outstanding that we just haven't been able to get to, as there's so many people on the session. Don't forget, Pension Power sessions are available. You can book those via the Civil Service Pension Scheme website. You can just search Pension Power in the search bar. There is a link in the Q&A as well if you'd like to have a look there, and sign up for one of those sessions, and you'll get all your questions answered by one of our dedicated Pension Power trainers. We will be sending out a feedback survey for today's session. Please let us know what you thought, what was good, what wasn't so good. We do use your feedback to shape our future sessions, so we will take all of your comments on board and make sure that we can provide the best possible events for you to give you the information that you're really looking for when it comes to your civil service pension. And if you'd like to listen to your information in a different way, the Civil Service Pensions podcast is also available wherever you get your podcasts. And there are various episodes available that you can listen to and find out more about civil service pensions and all of the key facts that you need to prepare for your retirement. So that's everything for today. Thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us. And thank you to Helen and Jo for their support. Have a great rest of the day and bye for now.